Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Browns Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns played the Vikings last week and will wrap up the preseason Saturday night in Seattle. We still don't know if Deshaun Watson will play, and the decision got more complicated when he stopped throwing Wednesday with arm soreness. The Browns are also painfully thin at tackle, which is another factor. Here to discuss that and so much more, as always, it's Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Scott, I am pumped. 2 weeks from Sunday, we'll do it for real with the Browns and Cowboys. We're getting close. But, you got that feel today because high school football is back. There were some games last night. We're taping this on Friday morning. Friday Night Lights starts tonight. College football starting soon. I mean, I know we've said this over and over on this podcast, but you hate to see the summer end, but thank goodness football's there on the other end. I love the fall. I love football season.
Yeah, I'm with you, Chud. And actually, I just this morning looked up Northwestern's schedule, and I don't think they're going to be that good this year. If they were, I would probably looked it up sooner and been more, been more anticipating. But I did look it up to see when the Cats' first game was. It's August 31st against Miami of Ohio. So I got a bunch of buddies that are Miami alums, so maybe I'll have to put a little wagers on the game, but. Yeah, it's that time of year, right? I got, I help out with the high school football section at the paper. We still do the Blitz. It's its own high school football section. So that starts tonight. College football starts, I think there's a game Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, week 0 or whatever they call it. And then the Browns will be here before we know it, right? We'll have that Kansas City game a week from Thursday. So I'm 2 weeks from yesterday. You get the Packers and Eagles in Brazil, and then the Browns. So, yeah, it's coming in a hurry, Chud. There's a little bit of a lull, right? We have the preseason game, the preseason finale Saturday night, and then there's a couple of practices. The Browns get off for Labor Day weekend, and then it'll be full bore. So, yeah, football season is upon us.
Yeah, we had David Greenberg, our new reporter on Go, was live out at West Geauga this morning. Every Friday, we're going to do a live shot from a different football stadium to just get the juices flowing for high school football and get the band and the coaches and cheerleaders out there every Friday. So that was fun. Different school every Friday. So I love that feel. But like you mentioned, we have to get through this game Saturday night. A late start, man. Did we ever figure out how the heck they got thrown all the way out to Seattle for the final preseason game?
No, I've talked to a bunch of people with the Browns, and they don't know. They were expecting a close game. The thought was maybe at Buffalo this weekend, which would have been an easy trip for everybody. If you're going to go to Buffalo, you want to go to Buffalo in August, right, for a preseason game. And instead, they find out when the schedule comes out that they're going to Seattle. And they don't know why. It's the league makes that decision. The Browns thought they had some say in it, but not complete say, and the NFL put them out there. I assume that Seattle was struggling to find that third game, and Seattle needed an opponent, and the NFL said, okay, here you go. It's the Browns. But it's a tough trip for the team, number one. And the 10 o'clock start, the Mariners are there this weekend, so that's why it's a 7 o'clock Seattle start, because the Mariners played during the day. But 10 o'clock start here, the Browns won't get back until like 9 o'clock in the morning Sunday, right? They play until, we're doing all Cleveland time. So the game gets over at 1 o'clock in the morning. Everybody showers, you load the buses, you get to the plane, you got to load the planes. Then it's a 4-hour trip, 4-hour flight. So you're looking at 9 o'clock in the morning, not a lot of sleep for the fellas. So it's just a tough trip. I don't think it'll matter once you get to the regular season, but if it was up to the Browns, they would not be going to Seattle, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it can throw off your rhythm and routine a little bit, no doubt. I mean, almost to the point where you're like, man, should they just stay the night and fly back the next day? But obviously, I know that's not how it works. But, definitely that's going to be a long trip. With everyone except Deshaun Watson, because we're going to dive into that next. Besides, if your name is not Deshaun Watson and you're a starter, could you possibly play in this game? The head coach of the Seahawks said that he was going to play his starters. How much will Stefanski roll out Brown starters?
I think he's going to play a good number of starters, 2, 3, 4 series. It's not going to be a ton. If I had to guess, and Stefanski has not, he's been tight-lipped about the entire plan. I would say 3 starters, probably a quarter plus. I think, but it depends on the player. And Stefanski said the other day, all the starters are going to be prepared to play, and then we'll tell them and we'll decide who plays. So I don't expect Myles Garrett to play. I don't expect Amari Cooper to play. David Njoku won't play. He didn't practice this week. Seems fine. He took a hit last week. Seems fine walking around. Was in the walkthrough, but they're not going to play him. Joe Bitonio is a question. Does he play? So the biggest name starters, your best veterans, the guys you don't want to get hurt, you really don't want to get hurt, won't play, but most of the starters will. So I'd expect the Grant Delpit to play and a Juan Thornhill and Martin Emerson Jr. And I don't want to describe them as run of the mill, right? But those kind of guys, I think, will play. But you won't see the biggest names. But it's still good to get out there. And it's interesting. Chud, we've talked about this throughout the preseason. We probably talked about it last year and the year before. Do you want those reps? Do you need those preseason reps? And it depends who you talk to. Jerry Jeudy, who he's an interesting one. Does he play? If Watson plays, I think Jeudy will play. But he's dealt with a knee injury since the OTA, so maybe you just put him in bubble wrap and don't play him until week 1. But he said it doesn't matter. He goes, if you're a baller, you're a baller. You show up, you play, you ball out. Shelby Harris, Zadarius Smith, those guys have been around the league a long time. They said they want those reps, that they take value in those preseason reps. Grant Delpit said it didn't really matter. He understood try to stay healthy versus getting reps. So each guy has his own opinion. The coaches will make the decision. But I think you'll see a fair number of Brown starters play a decent amount. And that's probably into the second quarter.
And you're going to see some Seattle starters, correct?
Yeah, that's what Mike McDonald said. Again, if a guy's dealing with an injury, any kind of an injury, you're not pushing him out there. So I don't think all 22 Seattle's guys will start, but I think you'll see a good amount. And again, I don't think it'll be a first half. Like back in the day, I remember starters used to play into the third quarter in that third preseason game, right? The dress rehearsal. I don't think anybody, or at least not many NFL teams, if any, play their guys that long. It feels like a quarter and a half, get them off the field and be done with it.
So let's talk Deshaun Watson now. And last time we talked, I think we were under the impression that he was going to play in this game.
Yeah.
I think it was the last question of a press conference you guys had with Stefanski where I guess it was assumed by his answer that he was going to play, or did that answer, was it legit that he was going to play? Have things changed now because of circumstances?
Yeah, the original, this is how it played out. I want to say it was the Thursday of the Vikings week, so that was 8 days ago. Stefanski said the plan is actually, it might have been Wednesday because then we talked to Deshaun Watson Thursday. So he said the plan is for Deshaun Watson and the starters to play against Seattle. He said, we'll evaluate things up until game day. Things could, left the door open for things to change, but said that's the plan. And that was pretty definitive for Stefanski. It was pretty early. Usually he keeps you in suspense. So the assumption was Watson's going to play. Then the Browns play the Vikings, and Jed Wills and Jack Conklin are still out. James Hudson III goes down with an ankle injury, doesn't practice this week. Hakeem Adeniji, another tackle, goes out with a knee injury, gets put on injured reserve. All of a sudden, you're really thin at tackle. And the question becomes, okay, well, do you play Watson if you're worried about your left tackle and worried about the protection? Stefanski said he'll take everything into consideration. Then you get to this week, and Wednesday, we're watching practice. Watson throws in individual drills. He throws in an early team drill. He's completing passes. All of a sudden, it's Jameis Winston taking all the first-team reps. Watson's on the side watching. And to me, I thought, as we're watching this, okay, that's Stefanski getting Winston ready for the Seattle game. He's decided not to play Watson. Then we talk to Stefanski, and he says, Watson had general soreness in the arm, a little sore. He's fine, but I held him out. Then you add that into the pile. All these factors, and that's one of them. If your quarterback on Wednesday, his arm was sore, you didn't want him to throw a bunch, do you need to put him out there Saturday? So that's one of the factors Stefanski's going to weigh, and he has not said whether or not Watson will play, and and the Browns have not said. They gave an update Thursday. We were not at practice Thursday. They practiced and then headed to Seattle yesterday. So we were not out there for practice. The official statement from the team was Watson threw and did his normal full complement of reps. No update on whether he'll play Saturday. So we're still in the dark about that. It's a good sign that Watson threw Thursday and was able to go through the normal practice, but I don't think that guarantees he plays against Seattle.
Now, do you know his general soreness, is that in the same family as general cramping? I don't know if you remember. Do you remember that? A former Indians player had general cramping, and then a Twitter account was started with general cramping. Do you remember that?
I do. Now that you bring it up, Chud. Yeah. It reminds me, I think it was like How I Met Your Mother. Every time there was a major or general, it was a little skit that they did about it. But yeah, general soreness, major soreness. It's just, Stefanski's been, I don't know, weird is the right word, certainly vague, secretive about injuries throughout training camp. And this was just another one of those, general arm soreness. It's a little bit of soreness. He could have kept throwing if he wanted to. So they don't think it's a huge deal. But anytime your quarterback quits throwing in the middle of a practice, it's certainly noteworthy, especially for a guy coming off shoulder surgery.
Are you concerned about this, Scott? Should fans be worried at all about his health and just the way the vibes are kind of going? Because I wouldn't call them fantastic vibes right now.
You're certainly right about that, Judd. The vibes have not been great regarding Deshaun Watson. And he's just been inconsistent. And we've talked about it. Like, there are good throws that he makes. And then there's bad throws. There's good decisions and bad decisions. We just haven't seen a whole lot of start to finish, and I'm a whole lot of, maybe we've seen 2 start to finish practices where you're like, okay, that was a really good practice for Watson. It's more up and downs. And then there's a couple where you go, that's not a good practice. So I think that is the vibe about Watson throughout this training camp. We haven't seen him in the preseason, so you can't say, oh, but he's been good in the preseason. So that's the thought, right? We just don't know what the Browns are going to get out of Deshaun Watson when you get to week 1. Regarding the shoulder, I think it is something to be concerned about. I don't think it's, oh my gosh, this guy's falling, his arm's not going to be okay. But I think it's certainly something that if you tend to be worried as a Browns fan, I would worry about it because, yes, quarterbacks have dead arm periods and all those kind of things. But when you factor in the injuries last year to the shoulder, the surgery, how much time he's missed in the last 2 years, I don't know how you can look at it and go, oh, everything will be okay. I think you have to be at least concerned to some degree.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm not going to lie. And I could see it going either way, how he plays this year, but I'm definitely concerned. I will just say this. Last week I made it clear, and I think it was 2 weeks ago, that I felt he should play in this Seattle game. I'm not one of those people that has to stick to that and just drop dead and say that's the way it should be no matter what. So I'm willing to kind of bend, right? Yeah. And I understand if he doesn't play this Saturday, I get it because of the tackle situation, because of the soreness. If Stefanski does not think he should play and doesn't want to risk it, totally understand that. I'm willing to amend my opinion. But what I will say is that I feel it's a real shame that if he doesn't play Saturday, that his first snaps in forever will be against the Cowboys. I will think it's a shame that he didn't get into one of those 3 games to get some work in. Not because I feel like he needs to take a hit and feel the pressure. No, not that. It's just like anything in life. It's anything you do. Scott, if you hadn't written an article in 3 years, you probably wouldn't want to have the pressure of your most important article be your first one. You'd want to maybe want to write about a preseason game before you write about the Super Bowl. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So I know that's a big, going from a preseason game to Super Bowl is a little different than preseason game and first game, but I'm trying to make a point that I will be disappointed that this guy has not played forever. We're not talking about Patrick Mahomes right now. We're talking about Deshaun Watson and all these years that he has not really played a lot. That's a shame to me.
Yeah, I completely get your point, Chud, and I think you make a lot of sense. I don't think those reps are as valuable as I think you think they are, but I do think there's value to him being on the field. He talked about last week, he said the biggest value was the operational part of it. And I think there is value to that. And it's not the first time you've been in a stadium, and it's not been on the field for snaps in a stadium that year, and the huddle operation and hearing the call, the play call through your headset, all those things. So I do think there's value to that. I don't know if, five throws matter when you get to week 1, right? That I'm not 100% sure on. But I get your point that it probably would be better for him to play. I would agree with that. I will also say that I push back, right? Does he need to play? Does he not need to play? I would say the left tackle situation would not prevent me from playing him, because you're probably going to have the same left tackle week 1 against Dallas. And Jermaine Ifedi seems to be the guy. Maybe Jed Wills or Jack Conklin comes back in time. I've seen both of them working out. I saw Conklin working out the other day, and he looked pretty good, but we're still a constricted schedule here before week 1. So I'm assuming it's going to be Fetty. Maybe it's James Hudson III if he comes back in time off the ankle. Regardless, sometimes stuff happens and you don't have a good left tackle, and you got to figure that out as a team, as a quarterback, as a play caller. That would not make me sit Deshaun Watson, because I think you have to figure that out. The shoulder is different. If the arm is really sore and he could use this long rest, if that's what the doctors say, the medical team says, then I would listen to that. But I would not just not play him because you're worried about him getting hit from the left side. Figure that out. Just have a bunch of quick throws. If you think those snaps are valuable, get the ball out of his hand, help the left tackle with double teams, because I think you can still accomplish that and get him out of the game healthy from a protection standpoint. The arm would be a different factor, in my opinion.
Man, amazing, astute point. I couldn't agree with you more. I was thinking the same thing. I brought up the left tackle because that's what everyone's talking about.
Sure.
Now, I will say this. If something happened because of the left tackle and he got hurt and was out for 6 weeks, I'm sure Stefanski would lose some sleep over that, right, and you would hear about it with the fans and media. That said, I agree with you. You could just listen. This is all I'm asking for. Put him in for one series, right, just so he can, feel the game again. The headset, like you said, take a snap, hand the ball off, roll him out right, throw a pass to the running back. You don't even have to give him 3 plays, protect him. Just like you said, there's a way to do it. I absolutely agree, and I would like to see that. That said, quickly, because I know we've gone on and on about this. Do you think he'll play Saturday? Do you want him to play?
I think he does play. I don't feel confident about that, but if I have to pick a side, I'm going to say plays, and I'm good with that decision. And just one quick point. I think that's different than last year. I criticized Stefanski for playing Denzel Ward in the preseason finale. Ward has an injury history. He has a concussion history. He's a guy that I didn't think needed those final preseason reps. And it turned out Ward wound up getting a concussion, came back and played week 1. And you can say, yes, Watson has an injury history, but it feels different to me. Watson, all the reasons you laid out versus a guy like Ward or a guy like Myles Garrett. I would not play Myles Garrett because you need to get him to week 1. And while you can make the same argument for Watson, it feels different to me.
Yeah. All right. Let's, if we had 2 hours, I would go individually and ask you about every guy. But they are dealing with so many injuries right now. I'm just basically going to throw it out and just say, Scott, talk about the injuries because they're dealing with a lot. What is going on? What are the updates? What are the concerns?
I would say the biggest concern, we've already touched on tackle. We don't know if Conklin or Wills are going to come back. I mean, they will at some point. We don't know if it's going to be week 1. We should get a much better idea when the Browns take the field Tuesday. They get back from Seattle. They're off Monday, practice Tuesday. Then you should, I would think, start to see guys come back. Now, they can also come back the next week, week 1. And we've seen that in the past. If you practice, they should practice Labor Day. So if you practice Monday or even if you practice Wednesday, you can get ready for that game on Sunday. But I would think we see guys come back as early as next Tuesday. So we'll get a better idea of tackle. The biggest concern outside of tackle to me is Denzel Ward. And I mentioned he had the concussion against Kansas City in the finale last year. He's got his 5th documented concussion since he was drafted in 2018. A week and a half ago in practice. Was making a play over the middle against Elijah Moore. The back of his head hits the ground. Comes up. You could tell something wasn't right. Stayed on the field. He might have taken a couple more reps. I was trying to remember if he did or not. It's tough to tell. Was he in another play after? But he wasn't in a bunch of plays. I know that. But stayed on the field. Put in concussion protocol. They said yes. In fact, he has a concussion. And what would be concerning to me as a Browns fan, or if you're the Browns, is so that happened on a Monday. 2 days later, he was on the field to watch the joint practices with the Vikings. He was out there the whole time, which is usually a good sign if you're in the protocol. You're out able to be in the sun. He looked fine. That's a positive sign. Well, this week we did not see him out of practice. And you can read into that what you will, but it obviously isn't as encouraging if he was out there watching practice. So does that mean he's inside because of light sensitivity? Whatever. That's tough. So Denzel Ward, first of all, from his personal health, 5 concussions in 6 years is a lot, something to be concerned about. Every time he gets asked about it, he says he's done his research. He feels good about how he's handling it. He's not worried about it. Maybe number 5 changes his thinking and even changes his thinking about his NFL future, right? And I'm making a leap here, and he's never indicated that at all. But that's a reality. You have to, at some point, you have to pay attention to that. And then from a football perspective, is he going to be ready to go week 1? He's such a huge part of what you do. You love your corners. If you're the Browns, you love to play a bunch of man-to-man. You can only do that if you got good corners. And Ward and Emerson and Greg Newsome give the Browns a really good threesome at corner. And if you take away the best one of those corners, then you have to adjust things on defense. So he's a big one to watch. Amari Cooper practiced this week. I think he's fine. Like I said, I think Njoku's fine. Pierre Strong Jr. has a rib contusion, went to the hospital because they had shortness of breath. They released him from the hospital. That could put him in jeopardy of playing week 1. And they're already thin at running back because I don't think Nick Chubb's going to be back in time for week 1. So you have Jerome Ford, Dante Foreman, and then question marks. So they have to figure out something there, whether it's Aiden Robbins, who's been in camp, or they bring in somebody at cut day, which cut day is next Tuesday. So we're going to have all kinds of roster movement. I'm going through the injuries in my head, Chad. I think those are the biggest ones. At linebacker, I think we'll get guys like Jordan Hicks will be back. Tony Fields was back this week. I think most of the guys that have been practicing and then had to leave will be okay. But Denzel Ward is certainly one to watch. And then the guys on the list, right? Chubb, Wills, Conklin, Naheem Hines has not practiced yet. Do they just keep those guys on PUP if they're able to be on PUP? Or do they try to bring them back for week 1? We're going to learn a lot about that next Tuesday during cut day because they have to make some designations.
Let's talk more about Chubb and where we stand on that. I don't know where I heard this. I don't know if it was on the radio, Twitter, or X, or somewhere where someone got the feeling that he was maybe going to be back in week 1 because of what they saw with him doing the squats and the sprints and all the working out. But Scott, help me out here. I never kind of felt like he was going to be back for week 1. I thought it was, and I think you and I even discussed it. Like, didn't we think like we would have been happy if it was week 3 or somewhere in that? Like, did we think that it was possible he would be back for week 1? Is it possible that he could be? Where do we stand with him right now? Have the Browns said anything? Have you heard anything? When will we see Nick Chubb?
Well, the Browns have not said anything. Except, he's getting better. We're not going to rush anything, no timelines. So that's where so that's what the official words are. I'm with you overall, Chud, that it always felt like October to me. What changed a little bit was when I got to watch him run those sprints for the first time at the Greenbrier. We were walking back from interviews, and he's out there under the watch of the athletic trainer, and he's running hard, and he's running as fast as he can. Now, he wasn't running as fast as he did last year before the injury, but he was running as hard as he could. Then I'm watching him do agility drills, and all of a sudden you connect that with the squat video. And it's like, man, can this guy get back for week one? But then the Browns tempered those thoughts. And hey, it's still really, it was still a really severe injury. It took 2 knee surgeries. So once they said that, I thought to think, okay, we're right. It's not going to be until October. So I still don't think it's till October. I mean, they could pull a stunner and he's practicing next week and maybe he's ready for week one. I would not completely rule that out, but there's nothing that I've heard that says, yes, he's going to be ready to go week one. Talked to Jerome Ford this week. It felt like he was preparing to be the guy week one with Chubb still out. So I think that's where we stand. And then if they keep him on PUP, then he has to miss the first 4 games. So then you're looking at week 5 would be the earliest that he could come back.
Okay, so it makes sense to maybe for some people to have that thought that, man, maybe he could be back earlier than we thought.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason, when you've seen him run, and I've seen him run since then, you go, okay, right? But it's that visual that gave, I think, people hope. But the reality is it's still a big knee injury, right? Multiple surgeries. The Browns are going to proceed with caution. And I've gotten no indication that they want to force this at all.
All right. I don't want to lose any listeners right now, so I don't think we talk a lot about it, but I think we have to at least bring it up. The Vikings game. What did we learn from that game, if anything?
We did not learn a lot. We learned guys can get hurt in the preseason. We saw tackles get hurt. We saw tight end fullback Giovanni Ricci get hurt. He felt like he was, I mean, this is in the weeds a little bit here, Chud, but he felt like a guy that was going to make the roster is the 3rd tight end / fullback. They signed him in free agency early, and yet he hurts his knee. They say Kevin Stefanski says he's going to miss a few weeks, and then they put him on injured reserve. Or I'm sorry, I think they waived him with an injury settlement. So he won't be here week one, which is just one of those things that happens in the preseason, happens at training camp. Guys get hurt. The bottom of the roster shifts. The top of the roster could shift too. So we learned injuries. We learned that turnovers matter even in the preseason. I thought Dorian Thompson-Robinson played pretty well. He moved the team up and down the field. He threw a big interception in the 2-minute drive to end the first half. He threw behind Jamari Thrash. Ball got tipped up, intercepted. And then Tyler Huntley starts the second half. They march down the field. He throws an interception on the 1-yard line. So you can't turn it over. When the coaches grade the quarterbacks, those things will stand out and be huge negatives. But I thought overall, Thompson Robinson played pretty well, continued his strong training camp. And then the other thing that stood out is the defensive line was able to get a ton of pressure. I don't care who was in there. They were able to pressure the quarterback, and I think that's going to happen throughout the year. The defensive line is loaded.
Mm-hmm. How about the running game? From thoughts on that? Got a big touchdown there.
Yeah, I don't think it's been firing on all cylinders, which is to be expected when you have a new line coach, you have injuries across the offensive line. It was nice to see Dante Foreman get in the end zone. He's going to be your short yardage back, taking that role from Kareem Hunt, who held it for most of last year after the Chubb injury. And Foreman, I saw him get helicoptered away from the Greenbrier with what looked like a serious injury at the time. Immobilized, put in the ambulance, flown to a hospital. He talked after the game. he took a direct hit and he felt pain go through his neck and down his spine. And he told the athletic trainers, and once that happens, they worry about paralysis. So they immobilize him. He always had movement in his arms and legs, but they were just being, cautionary and took him to the hospital. Obviously, he was scared. His family was scared. But then he said all the tests came back negative. He felt good, returned to practice a week later, played Saturday. He said he took a hit and he felt pain in his neck, but now he knows that that's okay and that he can deal with that and he'll have treatment for it. So I thought that was important. It was an interesting story. He talked about being grateful, not just to play, but to walk and to be alive. And, I think we lose sight of it sometimes. And, when we're watching NFL games, that really that is a concern. Guys can walk away paralyzed. And, and that was a thought in his head. And now he's back and he's been able to move forward. And he's going to be an important piece of this running game, at least until Nick Chubb gets back.
Thank you for a great answer to a question that wasn't delivered that many. People are probably wondering, Chud, what are you talking about? A big touchdown in a preseason game? But everything you just said there just kind of sums up why I brought it up. So nicely done there. You definitely had your Petrak pebbles this morning. You're bringing it. Yeah. You brought up DTR and his performance. Did I see that there were some rumblings about a possible trade with DTR?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Chud. I had forgotten about it momentarily. Yeah, Zach Jackson, good buddy from The Athletic, reported early in the week that the Browns have had talks with multiple teams showing a willingness to trade DTR. It didn't sound like it had progressed to where it was close. Obviously, it hasn't happened this week. But it's interesting that they would even entertain that. They drafted him a year ago. They were high on him. He struggled as a rookie. I think he's looked much, much improved this season. And you talk about arm strength. Can you get? We talk about accuracy. Can you get better accuracy-wise once you get to the NFL? And that's a popular discussion. It feels like Josh Allen has, and he's kind of example one for that. Arm strength is another question. You feel like guys come out of college, and that's how they throw the ball. But DTR, to me, has shown much better arm strength this camp than he did last year. And there's a number of throws you can point to where he fits it in a window. But man, I don't know if he makes that throw last year. So my point is I feel like he is improving and on the rise. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to be a starting quarterback in this league, but could he be your number two? Maybe. And it would be interesting if the Browns decided to trade him. Now, I would assume they would look for a pretty good draft pick in return. Maybe if they drafted him in the 5th round, so maybe you try to get a 4th rounder. I don't know if that's asking too much. Maybe you try to get an offensive lineman, a tackle to help, or pick a position where you feel like you're shorthanded if you're the Browns. Receiver, offensive tackle, whatever that position is. Can you upgrade there by trading your 3rd-string quarterback? And again, he would only be the 3rd-string quarterback this year, so I understand that the Browns would trade him. It doesn't feel like their MO, given that he's a draft pick and they like him. But they did sign Snoop Huntley, Tyler Huntley in the offseason, and he can fill that 3rd quarterback role. So I would expect the Browns to try to trade one of those two guys. I'm a little surprised that the report was Thompson Robinson versus Huntley, because I was just under the assumption that they would try to trade Huntley and keep DTR.
But they did make a trade. Were you surprised to see Cade York go?
No, I'm not surprised to see him go and wind up somewhere, because he was a 4th-round pick. He's got a huge leg. He's looked good in the 4 kicks he kicked in the preseason. The fact that they were able to get something in return, I mean, it's a conditional 7th-round pick, so it's about as low as you can go. But at least they got something back for him. So that makes sense. They traded him to Washington on Thursday. I will tell you this, Chud, during the podcast, the Browns have re-signed the kicker that they had last year, Lucas Havrisik, and he was on the practice squad last year. Then he kicked for the Rams for a bit. He might have bounced around after the Rams too. So the fact that they re-signed him makes me think that Dustin Hopkins is not ready to kick Saturday. He hasn't kicked yet. Kevin Stefanski said he's been dealing with a minor injury. I did see Hopkins kick in practice on a far field this week, and he looked fine to me. Not that I'm a kicker expert. So maybe they just want to give him another 2 weeks before the regular season. Stefanski says he's fine, but it's interesting that they would purposely bring in another kicker when you only have one more game to get through. And you would assume Hopkins could handle that. But the fact that they signed Hrisic, and I'm probably butchering his name, the pronunciation, but I think that's notable and maybe says Hopkins isn't ready to kick Saturday.
Will these injured players travel to Seattle?
It's a good question. I would say some will, some won't. Although they went a day early. Like, I don't know. That's a great question, Sean, and I don't know that answer. I think teams handle different ways. They handle with each injured person differently. Do you need to put Jack Conklin on a plane for 9 hours when he's trying to get that knee back and you could have swelling? That doesn't make sense to me. So I'm going to say most of the injured players, if it's a serious injury, stay home. So I would think Chubb, Conklin, Wills stay home, but I don't know that for sure.
Were you surprised that Mike Hall Jr. played against the Vikings? Because last time we talked, kind of under the impression that we might not see him for a little bit, according to Stefanski, right? But then he ended up playing in the game.
Yeah. I was surprised that the stinger healed as quickly as it did because he had a stinger Wednesday in practice and was back playing by Saturday. Once I knew he was healthy Saturday, then I figured he would play because once the Browns decided to play him or to practice him, then they were just going to continue to get him ready for the season. Barring any change in the legal status, barring any league suspension, which any suspension from the league would not come for a while. They do their own, or it does its own investigation. So, no, I think it was still newsworthy that he played. I made that my lead note and put a headline on it because he had such a tumultuous week, with the arrest and then practicing. And so, but I wasn't surprised once I learned that he was healthy.
Yeah, and a few more things have happened off the field with that situation. We learned more about the history with him, and I believe it's his fiance, correct?
Yeah, WKYC had that story, and there are two parts to the story. One was, according to a source, that the alleged victim recanted at least part of her story to police after the arrest, and he was charged with domestic violence last week. After that, she recanted at least part of the story to police, and the biggest part was the gun, that he held a gun to her head. So that's and again, it's sourced, and if that's true, then that's significant. The other part of the report is there was another incident between the two of them. It was early in 2023. She was originally arrested for, again, violence, domestic. I don't think the charge was domestic violence, but that kind of thing. Charges were dropped, but there is some background there in, I guess, their relationship. And I was trying to work on that story yesterday, and I talked to the chief of police in Avon, who all he would tell me was that the alleged victim, who is Hall's fiance, came into the police station last Friday and gave a new statement. He would not tell me the contents of the new statement. He would not say if she took back anything she said. All he would say was there is a new statement. So I do think that's relevant information, and I'm trying to talk to more people before I write anything more in depth. I'm trying to talk to the prosecutor in Avon. It's Avon Lake Municipal Court, just to see where this stands, because the case continues even after the new statement. But are they thinking about dropping the charges? Are they thinking about adding charges? Whatever. And the prosecutor was out of the office yesterday. I'm going to try him again today. So I'm just looking for more context and more information before I write something else about that.
Sure. Well, Scott, what are you looking to see in this final game on Saturday? Is it about roster spots? Is it about is that the main thing? Seeing some of the starters get out there and just see how they look. What are you going to be eyeballing the most?
Yeah, you nailed it, Chud. I mean, obviously, if Watson plays, it's all about Watson. It's how do these guys that maybe are coming off injuries, how do they look? And then there are roster spots to be had. And, one, for instance, and I'm going to do, 5 guys to watch. And I think one of the interesting spots is at cornerback. And again, injuries can change all this. If Denzel Ward's not healthy, then you need an extra corner. But let's assume Ward, Greg Newsome II comes back. Ward's healthy. Newsome comes back in time. You have Martin Emerson Jr. You have Cam Mitchell. Those are 4 guys that are locked into rosters, in my opinion. Then you have Khalif Alassi, he's taken over for Ward with the first team, so I have him on the roster. If they keep 6 corners, that means Miles Harden, the rookie draft pick, who's at a really good camp, Tony Brown II, who's a veteran corner and an ace special teamer, and Justin Hardy Sr., who is an ace special teamer and a veteran corner. You probably only keep 1 of those guys, maybe 2 if you keep 1 just for special teams. So how does that play out? And if Miles Harden plays great this week, you probably keep the rookie. So I think he's a guy to watch. Aiden Robbins, I mentioned him, the running back. They might have to make a decision on adding a 3rd running back. Is it Robbins, or do they go and pick somebody off waivers, claim somebody off waivers next week? Defensive end. It feels like there's 1 roster spot to be won. That 5th guy. Is it Isaiah McGuire? Is it Isaiah Thomas? Is it somebody else? Do they feel like they can upgrade when roster cuts come? So it's those type of position battles that I think are worth watching. And then if Jermaine Ifedi plays at left tackle, how does he play? Does he show that, hey, he can be trusted week 1? Or do you feel like you have to make some drastic move there? So I think those are the biggest things that I'm keeping an eye on.
All right, well, Scott, that's it for me. Unless you got anything else, I think we head into the sunset of the final preseason game, talk about it, and then get ready for final roster spots before they open the season.
I think you're right, Chad. No, I think that's it. I think we covered a bunch of stuff. It's how the preseason is, right? Like, it's a lot of you're watching the second half going, oh my gosh, there's nothing here. But then there are things to watch. And there are guys whose livelihoods and futures are at stake. So I'll be glued in to the game Saturday, keep an eye on everything. And then things happen fast. I know we talked about there's a lull, but you could see roster cuts starting Sunday and continuing Monday. Then they have to happen. You have to be down to 53 by Tuesday at 4:00. So it'll be a flood of, obviously, roster moves by then. And then it's, okay, do they claim people off waiver? And then they have to make more roster cuts. That'll be the story of the early part of next week, as well as those injuries updates we talked about. But there's all kinds of guys get cut. And what happens? What do they do? The injured guys. So it's going to be a busy part of that week before the focus shifts to week 1 in Dallas.
Yeah, and interesting that you brought up Miles Harden and the wide receivers, because I actually had that down on my notes to ask you about those 2 things. And you made some great points there when you're watching this final game.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right about receiver, Chud. Not to cut you off, but you feel like the top 4, Cooper, Judy, Moore, Tillman, are set. And let's say they keep 6, which it could be 5, it could be 6. I guess it could be 7 if one of them is a returner. But I'm settling on 6. You have David Bell, who's injured right now. Jamari Thrash, who's looked pretty good, the rookie. Michael Woods, the second. There's too many guys. There's not enough spots. Somebody's going to lose out among those 3, I think. And how does that play out?
Yeah, no question. There you go. So there's still some things to watch here.
No doubt about it. Well, Chud, thank you as always. And we'll do this next week. We'll talk roster cuts. We'll talk injury updates. and we'll start looking ahead to Dallas. Maybe we do season predictions next week, Chud. We could do that in a little lull, in a little week off before week 1. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But plenty to talk about next week, obviously. So thank you, as always, Chud. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.